Well, that was quite an entrance.
Thanks.
But now that you're here, we know we're talking about ramps, but maybe not the ramps that you're going to jump over all the school buses at the monster truck rally.
Okay, fine. Let's talk about accessibility ramps.
Yes.
Let's talk about safety and codes and permits and all that exciting stuff and
Correct.
textures and materials, wood versus aluminum, location, space, and all the things that we need to know about accessibility ramps.
Correct. And there's some things that are important, as you have shared, on the progression of ALS and when is the best time to get a ramp put in?
So I personally feel, and we tell a lot of families this, immediately, disease progression is different for everybody. And so making sure that the number one thing you have is a safe entrance and exit in and out of the home, I think is number one. When starting to talk about remodeling. That could be something that is quickly put in, quickly dealt with, and it's done. It's the checklist that's off, and you don't have to worry about your loved one not being able to get in and out no matter how fast this disease might progress.
And I know when we get called, we often get the questions on, what do I need? Because it's not a common thing that people build a ramp in and out of their home.
Well, and I think a lot of families take for granted, they think it's an easy process. And when you're already overwhelmed with a diagnosis such as ALS, it can make something that might be a few phone calls and an easy request feel like a monumental challenge on top of everything they're already dealing with. Right. So this is meant to be a resource and a guide, and hopefully of service to families to know what kind of questions they should be looking for and asking either their contractors or any groups that are going to come and help them with accessible ramps.
So what we're going to be doing is looking at first of all, we're going to talk about the rules and regulations on what ramps are, because there's often confusion, even if you just do a Google search. Next, we need to assess what a person's home is, what's going to make the most sense. And then we can start looking at, does it make sense to do a small portable metal ramp? Should we do a larger ramp? Should it be built out of wood? Should it be built out of metal, say aluminum or steel? Does a ramp that it doesn't make sense to build a ramp? Maybe we need a paver stone walkway to get from a point in the front of the yard to the back of the yard to move around. So we're going to look at all the different scenarios, and maybe not all of them, but a lot of them, and hopefully answer a lot of those questions.
I'm really looking forward to showing families about the different sizes, the different options, and yes, ramps can be fun too.
Well, the first thing we probably want to do is start with the very unexciting things, which are going to be the rules and codes of what ramps are.
Well, why does a family even need to know this? Why can't they just count on their contractor?
From my experience, what I've observed is that not a lot of contractors build ramps on a regular basis, so they may not know the specifics of how they are. The second thing is there's some often confusion as to what code book to follow when it comes to building a ramp.
There's more than one book.
There's more than one book. And specifically, there's books that apply to commercial structures, like the building that we're in, or a church, or a restaurant, or an office building, as what would apply to your own home. Gotcha. And so what we're going to be looking at is the IRC, the International Residential Code, because that applies more broadly to the residential rules. And the ADA rules that get thrown around.
The American Disabilities Act has
Correct.
a set of rules, and it's specified more towards.
It's for commercial structures. Yeah. So that's where that falls into line with the UBC and other code books. So again, you want to check your local municipality to see what code books they're following. But as a general rule, we're going to be talking about the IRC, the International Residential Code.
Okay. While we talk about this, let's talk about if somebody needs help getting a ramp, who do they talk to?
That is a good question, and it's probably going to be different depending on who an expert is within an area.
Well, and I also think what the family's resources are, because as you and I know, insurance is not going to cover housing insurance policies, and medical policies for insurance do not cover accessible ramps to get in and out of the home. So that leaves families with either taking money out of their savings account to cover these costs, which can cost thousands, The families also have to trust that whoever is helping build this ramp has an understanding of these guidelines and rules. So I'm really glad that we're talking about it.
Correct. And it's not always that a contractor or Uncle Charlie, who's handy with tools, don't know, or they don't have good hearts. They might want to do the right things, but without knowing the specifics on what works and what doesn't, then that's where you can run into problems down the road that you didn't even know you might have.
And my focus always are for the families that are living with ALS, that they have the most informed information, the most educated choices for the resources, the area, and the situation that they're in. So that's what this video is about.
So let's talk codes.
Okay.
So the general rule of thumb when we're dealing with a ramp, first we got to figure out how high are we going to go? How tall? Do we have 1 step, 3 steps, 5 steps? And we're going to measure it in inches. For every inch you go up, the general rule of thumb is 12 inches out.
So you can think of it as a 1-to-1, a 1 inch to 1 foot?
1 inch to 1 foot.
Okay.
Now, here's where is an important thing to note, is in the commercial rules, in the ADA rules, that is it. There's no, it's 1-to-1.
No matter what.
Or less. I mean, there's no steeper ramp that you're allowed to do. Mm-hmm. In the residential rules, it says that if you don't have the space, you can go down to a 1-to-8 ratio, which is for every inch up, 8 inches out. Instead of the 12.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, the caveat with that is if you have a ramp that is like that, it needs to have a grippable handrail that is going up. So pedestrian traffic has something to hold on to. And we'll talk more later the difference between a handrail and a guardrail, which is a difference.
Oh, that sounds exciting too.
It is. But let's just stick with the code rules now. So we want to go 1 to 12. If we can't go 1 to 12, we can go down to 1 to 8 or anything in the middle.
Well, let's talk about that, because what that does is it gives you a decline or an incline when you're going up the ramp. And that's a really point of safety for families with ALS. If you don't understand the disease progression, families with ALS can be affected all differently at different rates. Yeah. And so one of the aspects is losing that core muscle that holds our bodies up. Mm-hmm. And so the safety of that ramp is to keep that person with ALS and their caregivers as safe as possible.
Yes. And something else that people think is, oh, well, it could be steeper, not a big deal. I'm strong. I can push that right up. Well, pushing up is not always the problem. It's the coming down. And as you talked about the core strength of falling forward, or the person who's holding onto that chair and whoop, I lose my grip and shoo, out goes your loved one into the street. You don't want that either.
Yeah, you definitely don't want
So we want to follow these rules. They're there to keep people safe going up and down that ramp. So we want to go 1 to 12. We can't go 1 to 12. We go 1 to 8. Now let's talk about the size of the ramp. By code, for the residential code, it asks that you do at least 36 inches of width, which is 3 feet. That's pretty common. And the ramp length can be as long as it needs to be. Okay. And then at the landings, this would be at the top by where the door is, and then down at the bottom where it's going to land, it requires a 36 by 36 as a minimum. And again, that's a minimum. Sometimes we might want that bigger. Minimum landing zone.
And that's for turnaround radius and safety of navigating around.
Yeah, so you don't want to have, let's say you're putting one inside your garage, and like, oh, we can get down, but you only have a couple feet between there and the wall. You don't want to bash into that wall every time you're going down the ramp. It's not safe. Or the other thing is, you'll sometimes see somebody who will put a ramp up to a top step at a doorway. Well, they go up to that top and it lands on the top stair, and then the door opens. Well, when you go to push the person up in the chair and then you let go of the chair to open the door, whew, you're going back downhill. So it's not safe to have a ramp that just leads directly to a door. You want to have that landing platform. Okay, does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Now, one of the areas that it's important to know those landings is in the commercial rules, the ADA rules. They require a 5x5 platform, which isn't bad, but sometimes that gets in the way of the space and can make a price difference too. Okay. The other thing is if you are required to have a longer ramp because you're at a height that's, say, 35 or 40 inches. In the residential code, you can go as long as you need to. In the commercial code, you can only go 30 feet, and you're required to have a landing zone. Now, again, we're not talking about this so that people can build a commercial ramp, But if their contractor is saying, oh, it's required, I got to build a landing platform, they might be confusing the commercial rules with the residential rules. So, but again, we want to check local jurisdictions because different jurisdictions may have different specific rules for ramps, but more than likely they're going to defer to what just the general code books are.
Okay.
Another thing that is important to note when it comes to code for ramps, and this is kind of a misconception, ramps, because they are built and attached to the home and connected to the home, still fall under building code rules. There's a misconception that is often shared that I hear about, that someone will say, this is a medical device, therefore it doesn't have to follow or fall under building code rules, which is not correct. The building code does not allow for that. There are sections that allow for temporary structures, but it's something that has to be continually permitted and inspected. So what we want to do is either fall under the area of where it is not required to have a permit, but it still needs to follow codes. And we just need to make sure that we're checking with our local jurisdictions. But some important things to do are make sure that the ramp you're getting or constructing is self-supporting, that we're not connecting it to the home for its structural support. If we do, now we have to meet what the code of that home is, which if you're in an area that has frozen ground, you're going to have to meet frost guidelines, you're going to have to meet different structure guidelines, and it's just a lot to want to try to get into.
So for clarification, we're talking about ramps that are self-supporting structures. They
Correct.
are not attached to the house.
Correct.
And follow the building permitting codes that apply to that situation.
Yes, that's what we want to be able to do.
So now that we've discussed rules and regulations and those fun, exciting codes, I think we should go talk about some materials.
Yep, I have some set up right over here. We can talk about the pros and cons of doing wood versus aluminum, and also take a look at the just some of the shorter portable suitcase ramps.
Yeah. And I think we're going to go take a look out at my house and a couple of other ramps.
Correct.
And talk about that a little bit and what were pros and cons there.
Yes, and I've done a few already that we're going to go do an assessment and then take a look at a completed project.
Hey, thanks for doing
so people
that.
can see what it is. Yes. So you ready to go take a look?
Yeah,
Let's go.
Look at all these materials. Why don't you tell me a little bit about it?
Okay, so we're starting with kind of the beginnings of what we're looking at for a ramp. Of course, I've got some of the tools that we'll be looking at as we're looking at the different ramps, and as far as figuring out elevations and what our height is so that we can calculate how long we're looking at. Let's talk about the base of a ramp. We're on the wood frame structure. And again, the reason that we want to talk about wood is, you can go wood or metal. Wood is probably the most common material because you can get it at any place. There's a local lumber yard. And if you've got family who want to help, organizations that want to help, they're probably going to be constructing it with basic materials.
But for the family that's watching this video today, we want them to be aware that pressure-treated lumber should be the priority for if it's touching the ground.
Correct. So what we want to do is we've got a piece of treated lumber versus non-treated. For the base structure of the ramp, what we want to use is a treated product, so it's touching the ground. That's going to meet code, and it's just going to last the longest.
No matter where you are in the country and elements, that's a safe option.
Yeah, this is the way to go. So use treated lumber for touching the ground. The only place that might not matter is if you're inside a garage or inside your home. The treated lumber is not an issue, but we want to use it when we're talking outside. Once we have our base built, the next thing we want to take a look at is the decking. Now, we use a pressure-treated plywood on many of our decks. The other thing that we'll also use is a thicker, like a standard 2x6 or 2x8. But you can see that what we do with this is we've got a non-skid coating, and it comes in different colors. We've got a couple of examples of products that we use here.
But really, you can make it blend or match the home so it looks like the structure came with the home.
Correct.
It's aesthetically pleasing.
Correct.
But I see you have some other plywood here. What is that?
Yeah, so I have here these are sometimes, this is what you don't want to use.
This is a do not use.
Yeah, don't use it because we've talked about this. You and I have both gone up to a place where somebody thought, let me just put a ramp in.
And this really rots fast.
This
in the
rots
elements.
fast. This is not designed to be a long-term walking surface in outdoor elements, because as it gets wet, it will start to come up start to come apart, and pretty soon you can just put your foot right through it. Standard plywood that's not treated is structurally strong enough, but as it gets wet, and what will happen is people will sometimes put either a carpet, or sometimes they do roofing. I don't recommend roofing, but they'll put that over the top. Well, that just traps moisture into this stuff. As it stays wet, it starts to delaminate. Also, with the pressure of the wheels from the weight of the wheelchair going over, you'll start to delaminate, and pretty soon you've got the plywood that's falling apart, and you can put your foot right through it.
So we know to stay away from that type of plywood, those two type. But what about Trex or composite decking?
So composite decking, this is something that, again, we see it all over the country, very popular, and it is a good decking material. The challenge with this product is that when it is on a slope or a ramp slope and it is wet, it is very slippery.
So high slip hazard, probably don't use.
I do not recommend using a composite that is going to be slicked when it's wet. It just does not. It's not a good option.
So really the non-stick deck paint over 2x6s or
plywood, or I brought this in. We don't see this much in our part of the country, but everywhere else they'll know exactly what this is. Just a deck grade southern yellow pine that's treated. And of course you'd want to take this and put some kind of a coating. And with this non-slip paint, we've got two companies that have a product that's specific for this, because here in the Northwest we get
a lot of elements.
Well, yeah, we're known for our elements for outdoors, but you can also take and kind of do this on your own with an outdoor deck paint, not a stain, but a paint or a coating that you can lay down, broadcast some sand, put another coat on it, and accomplish
Gives
very
it that
similar
texture you need, but not that trip hazard.
Correct.
Like the roofing you were talking about or something else. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So moving on, we get to where we want to be toward we've got our railing that we want to consider. We use a board that is a smooth, also treated, so it's designed for outdoor elements as our, for our rail posts and our top and railing. And we use this as compared to this would be the ground contact. And you can see with all these puncture holes,
it's got slivers just begging to be.
It's a sliver hazard.
Yeah.
So all wood has the potential to have slivers and splinters on it. But if we can avoid it, we would prefer to stick with something that's designed or intended for a deck rail. We've got this, and then I also have the difference. Now, this would be a grippable handrail. We'll be talking about the difference between a guard rail, which is just designed to keep somebody from going over the edge, and a handrail. So this would be an example of a grippable handrail versus this might be just part of a guard rail.
I see.
Okay. So we've got the ramp. Now, once we get the ramp, of course, we'll be talking more about this up and coming when we visit some of the locations. Getting to the top platform or porch isn't
not the only thing we're looking at.
No, we got to
has to get into the house.
Into the house.
Yes.
And most doors will have a transition that can be anywhere from 3/4 to 2 inches tall. 1.5 inches is very common. So there's a lot of different things. I can't say there's a lot. There's a few different things on the market to help with that transition getting in and out of the house. This is one that we made out of wood. It's just milled from a table saw and just a simple.
It's got the natural little slope.
Got the natural little slope, goes right up against the transition on a door. This is a product that is actually kind of a prototype of one that we're looking to be testing. It's a really lightweight, different colors that again would serve that same purpose. There's rubber ones that are out on the market, and we want to make sure that we're addressing getting in and out of the door.
I think at our house we'll be able to show you some rubber ones
for
transitions. And again, the goal is for families living with ALS, we want to give them the most informed decisions.
Correct.
To also be aware that when you're planning for your ramp, also plan for in and out of the home. Look at those doorway thresholds and make sure that this isn't something else you need because you want to make sure you cover all your bases.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we've talked about ramps and materials. Let's start looking at just the entry-level basic ramps.
Should we go look at portable ramps first?
Some portable ramps, and we've got some right here that we can take a look at.
All right. I'm excited to see how easy these are.
Let's go.
All right.
Okay, so here we are taking a look at our first set of ramps. These are portable. They call them suitcase ramps. And as you can tell,
they look like suitcases.
Looks like a suitcase. And
unwrap And there you go.
Unwrap and unfold. And appropriately, they're very good for travel. You'll see sometimes people might use this. They can see them online. They're weight rated for anywhere from usually around 800 pounds is a common, 600 to 800. And
Obviously very durable, non-stick. So a safe alternative if you're traveling with family, going to get into a family's home, a couple steps, great option. So tell me about this situation then.
so here we've got it just set up with, we've got 3 steps. This is about 17 inches tall. This particular suitcase ramp is a 10-footer.
So this one is actually not a safe option, is what you're saying.
It's a little too short. Now, for a short term, you just need to, you're traveling to a relative's house, going over to meet with some friends, and you want to get the chair inside. Paying attention, it's just great. You can set it up, you can go in, you can come out.
But this is not a long-term option.
Not a good long-term option. They're just not designed for that to have long-term use. They're designed to be portable, set up easy. Let's go in. You still can attach them at the top, but as far as making sure that it would hit the right slopes. Now, down here, we're only about 12 inches. So if we were 12 inches tall,
This is fine.
Then this would be okay.
So we're going to go take a look at some other options, small, medium, large, aluminum versus metal. We've looked at some materials and we looked at suitcases. So let's go and check out some other ramps.
That sounds good.
All right, let's go. So here we are at my house.
Yes.
Yes. And so a little background story really quick.
Okay.
We intentionally bought our house with multiple access to get in and out. We wanted as little steps as possible, and we wanted master bedroom and bathroom on the main floor. We knew we could work with that. So when we came here, we bought this home, we put in something super easy, an aluminum ramp. But what would you do? What would you do if this was a family coming to you saying, we're in this new situation, we really don't understand what we should be looking for? Walk me through as a homeowner what I need to know for ramps and ALS.
Well, for just the going in and out from a ramp perspective, you're right. It's very simple. We have one step. We've measured it. It is about 4.5, 5 inches. So from a getting in and out standpoint, it's pretty easy. And it's a very simple option just to go ahead and you can purchase one of these aluminum ramps. You can get them. It's easy to set up, easy to take off. You could even do like those the portable ones that we looked at back at the center, the ones where you fold up and set up.
Yeah, there's a lot of alternatives families should take into consideration if they want the ramp to be removed later. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's fairly easy to remove most things, but yeah, you don't have to do anything significantly permanent in this situation. Although this would be a candidate because of how it is. If someone said they wanted something permanent, you could do one that was a concrete one that rolled all the way up. So that would be another option, but certainly more expensive and definitely permanent.
Yeah.
This aluminum one is good. A wooden structure that would be very similar to this could also be put in by someone who's handy or a local contractor that would want to do it. It's fairly easy as long as you're getting materials that are going to be the right kind of materials and you keep your slopes. We've got on this, we measured about 5 inches tall, which tells us we need about a
5 foot ramp.
5 foot worth of ramp.
That we've been talking about.
That's right, that 1-to-1 ratio. So we have our fancy level here. We can just go ahead and set that and see how well you did. And we can read that this is about a 1.1 to 1.4. It's kind of bouncing back and forth because you're standing on the ramp. It's moving a little bit, which the reason that it's not exact is because our ground is sloping away a little bit here.
Which we have to take into consideration.
You want to take into consideration, especially on a steeper slope or one where it goes long. What you could find is as you build your ramp out, the ground is falling away at the same rate. So you're really not gaining anything.
We've looked at this ramp now. Now let's go take a look at the threshold and the door so we can kind of see that transition period of what it would look like for a chair to go in and out.
Sounds good.
All right.
So what we have here for your threshold on the outside is very easy to get into. It's a good choice. So you've got the mat. It leads right up. There's hardly any transition going in. A smooth way to get over. But on the inside, a lot of people don't know this. They walk over their door every day.
You don't think about that. It's both directions.
It could be anywhere from 3/4 to maybe even 2 inches higher from this door threshold to what the actual floor is. So let's see what you got. Yep. So there we go.
Yeah.
It looks
Easy
good.
peasy.
So
Yeah.
we've got the rubber transition on the inside. I'm sure that was pretty easy to put in.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so it stays in place, easy to get in and out.
So what you're saying for your assessment here is space, distance, decline, and in and out of the door. Don't forget that.
That's right. We got to get all this pretty much of a slam dunk for an easy way to get in and out. Good examples of small ramps.
Should we go look at medium-sized ramps?
Let's go look at some bigger ones.
All right, let's go. Here we are today. We're in Spokane, Washington at the Brick House, as you can see.
Yes.
Where you recently just completed building a wooden ramp.
Yes, we did.
So I have some questions for you. When you showed up to this job site, how did you assess it? How did you pick wood versus aluminum? And tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so this, as you can see, we had 2 steps that were going up. So not unlike like your place just had the one. This has 2. They're about 7 inches each step. So we were about 14 inches tall, which tells us we'd like to be about 14 feet
out.
And it just so happens that this worked out very well that we have 14 feet. In fact, if we take our digital level.
Oh, we're going to double check your work here, right on camera.
That's right. So
Ooh.
we can see we're at about 1.06. In fact, I think it's a little bit prettier when we put it down here.
That's still really close.
1.07,
That's a 1-to-1.
1.08. Yeah, so we're very close to that 1-to-1 ratio, so we're in good shape there. So the discussion, we did talk about wood versus aluminum. The big thing, there were a couple of deciding factors. Time was not an issue because actually we could build the wood one a little bit sooner because we had the materials available versus aluminum had to be ordered and brought in. So the wooden one, though, the deciding factors were, one is it just kind of blended in. You can see they have a pre-existing porch that's made out of wood. The colors that this came in, we're able to actually get a specific color on the deck itself for the non-slip paint to make it just look like it's natural, just part of what's being here.
And it looks like you used pressure-treated wood down here on the ground, but
We-
not up here. Why is that?
Well, this is actually treated wood also.
Oh.
It just doesn't have the holes in it. So the puncture treated is a ground contact type treated wood.
So it won't rot. Don't
So it
have to
won't
worry about
rot.
anything.
This is an above ground treated. So again, it is designed for our elements to get wet, to deal with.
We are in the Pacific Northwest.
Correct. To deal with the elements that are going to be out here to keep it bug-free, resistance-free, rot-free. So on the top. And this product is available in the Northwest, depending on what region you're in. And we'll talk about it later when we talk about specifics on materials. Lumber can be region specific. So
Okay.
you're going to want to know what region you're in as to what's available. But getting things that are treated, designed for your environment is important.
But I'm hearing you say a couple of things for families to be very aware of. And that is the landing part, where you're coming from and where you're landing.
Correct.
Because as you can see here, this landed perfectly. It's got the concrete and it's got access to the garage or down to the driveway.
Correct.
But not everybody's going to have that choice.
No, this one worked out very well. Now let's pretend, for example, there was one more step in that porch.
That wouldn't have worked here then.
We couldn't have come down straight. It would have been that motorcycle jump that you were so excited to get on your motorbike about. But what we probably would have had to do is come off the side of the porch to get more length, because height is always going to equal length when it comes to the ramps. So for every inch we go up, we got to
Gotta go a
calculate
foot out.
how many inches we got to go out. And so we would have to figure where that distance was going to come into play. And we'll look at some other projects where we have to do that math and sort out in a small yard, how do you make this fit? But this one just worked out very well. And again, we went with wood because it fit in, and the cost for this particular project was significantly less than the aluminum one, just based on the materials availability and how quickly we could turn it around.
So I think that if families are confused or not really sure, maybe they could ask their contractor to give them multiple quotes, one
Correct.
for an aluminum and one for a stick-built option, and the difference in time it would take for them to complete those projects.
Correct.
Families with ALS have, time is not always on their side, and so they have to act quickly. And exterior ramps are one of those things that need to be thought of immediately
Yep.
for safe access in and out of the home. But also, insurance doesn't cover this. There's no homeowners insurance that I'm aware of that they could go and say, we've been diagnosed with this disease and our life is changing, help. And the insurance company, that's a whole other episode. But for now, for us to inform the families, we want them to know that there are multiple options and questions they should be asking as they move towards the ramp project.
Correct. And anytime we can answer questions, we're happy to do
Oh,
that.
absolutely. Yeah. We've been getting some excited emails from people asking for some help. So I'm excited that we're making some traction with these videos and seeing where they're going.
So any more questions that you have on this particular project?
More than anything, I think I had always assumed that aluminum ramps were better because they were more easily ordered and installed and then pulled out quickly. Some families with ALS, they don't want the ramp when their loved one has passed. And some families do. And it depends on family dynamics and weather and resources and all of that. But I'm glad that we're having a chance to talk about this today.
Yeah. So yeah, for us, and this is going to be different in your region, like we will actually offer to come pick up a ramp, even if it's made out of wood, when they're done using it. We can't buy the wood ramp back, where aluminum ones maybe you can sell back on the market. But we will recycle the wood if it's not needed, and we'll use it for other projects. So we try not to let things go to waste. We very rarely do we throw it. But this is a very high grade of wood. It's not a challenge to find something else or somebody else who might be interested in that product. Remember, the ramp is only part of getting into the house. We also have to consider what we're doing up at the top. And this will be a good example to show that the door is just slightly higher on the outside. So to get in, we had to build a little smaller transition ramp to go in. And then on the inside, there's a larger one dropping down. I think something that is important for families to know is that the contractor may not think of what the purpose of the ramp is to get inside the house, not just to get up to the next level.
Right.
So that is a common missed thing. And I will do it when I do assessments. Let's say I get called for a bathroom and they already have a ramp, and I walk up the ramp onto their porch, and then I can see that they've just kind of thrown some chunks of whatever they could find to get up and over the threshold because that wasn't addressed when the ramp was put in. So make sure that the families ask.
The full pathway is
Yes, the full
taken
pathway
into
in.
assessment.
Yes, we want to get up onto our platform, and then we need to get inside the house and up and over that threshold easily.
It's funny, you would think that these simple little things, but you if you don't know about it, you're not going to think
You
about it,
don't,
not going to say it.
and that's one thing. People step over those thresholds all the time, never think about how a wheel is going to be impacted by just that little space.
And this video is to help able-bodied people understand families with ALS and their challenges, and
Correct.
and to help them make the best decisions with the resources they have. So
right.
thank you for your expertise.
You're welcome.
Are you ready to go check out a bigger
Let's
ramp?
go look at some more.
Let's go.
So I'm here in Spokane on North Howard Street, and as you can see, there is no ramp behind us. So we're going to be walking through the process of how do we evaluate where and how to put a ramp. This is a very common style of home, not just here in Spokane, but across the country, with 3 to 5 steps going up, a small concrete porch, and a yard that's not very big. We don't have unlimited length, so we need to figure out how do we get a ramp to fit inside of this yard with the length that we need to reach, and also the configuration of the yard itself. So let's take a look at how we get started on that. So the first thing we need to do is we just take a look at what the top is and assess how high we are from the top down to grade at the bottom. Easiest way to do that is just take the tape measure, and we can put it next to the sidewalk, next to the porch here, and we can see that we're about 24 inches from the side, but that's not where we need to get to. We actually need to get all the way down to the sidewalk and eventually to the street level. So another way you can do that is you can measure each individual step and then add them all up. Another tool, if you could hear it chirping while we're talking here, is this is a tool that we have that's a barometric level, and I can take it from here, set it down here, and that tells me that the height distance between the steps and the lower part of the sidewalk is about 29 inches. Well, without running my tape measure out, just by looking at this, I can tell you if we have 29 inches tall and we need to have 29 lineal feet of ramp, here to the end of the sidewalk is not enough length. Plus, I can tell that the yard slopes down, and I could take the level down there and see, but my guess is that we're probably somewhere between 36 and 40 inches different between the sidewalk and the top of this porch. So a straight ramp that goes down isn't gonna work. We're gonna have to take a look at another option on how we're gonna run this ramp. So let's take a look and start at the top of where we need this ramp to go, up at the door. As we know, we need to have a flat level transition platform because we don't want anybody who's on a ramp to be rolling down hills or trying to get the door open. So we've got the top platform and we need to measure this out, and it needs to be at least, we like doing 4 feet. 3 feet's the minimum, but you can see that's pretty tight. So we like looking at either 4 or 5 feet, but we'll look at around 4. And then lengthwise, we can go ahead and either remove this and make a broader platform or just leave this intact. We're going to be leaving that intact, and then that tells us this way we have about 6 feet. So we're going to have, let's say about a 4 by 6 foot top platform, which gives plenty of space for the wheelchair, for anyone who's helping, to be able to open that door without worry about going down the ramp. Now with this yard and how it is set up, what we're actually going to be doing is, because it's too challenging to get down to the sidewalk, we're going to take the ramp and make a horseshoe style ramp. The downside is we're going to lose a little bit of yard while we go inside, but that's better than having our ramp go land in the middle of the street. So what we're going to be doing is from here, because we're 29 inches tall from this point, this is going to become our landing platform for the new ramp. We'll have to remove a few of the bushes and of course trim back the hedge as we're going down the sidewalk. But we're going to take this ramp, we're going to run it in the yard, and at 29 feet, to get our 29, we're going to take the ramp this direction for about 14, 15 feet. We're going to have a level platform, and then we're going to bring it back this way. So it'll be this nice horseshoe shape. Now, a discussion on this particular site, should wood or aluminum be used? Now, the challenge that you'd have to factor in with aluminum is because aluminum comes in preset pieces. You have to account for this porch. This porch isn't large enough to just land. We don't want to just land the ramp right here because that doesn't give us enough space. Now, if we have a platform, we can attach the platform here and then do a little transition that's going to go in. But then we're going to have that platform in its preset piece, and it's going to have to go right against those steps. And then, again, the best way to do that will be the same configuration where it goes down in the yard, across, and then it comes back and lands. Because if you go down and do an L shape, again, the ground is curving away faster than what the ramp would be able to catch up to, so it makes it too steep. So for aluminum, the configuration would be the same, and it would either have to be attached here or some sort of a hybrid system where a platform was built and then the aluminum ramp was going up. We are going to be doing an all wood ramp for this one because it's easy for us to customize. We can make the transition nice and level to the top because we can build our decking right over these steps and then run it right down. It'll fit the neighborhood, and it can either stay as it is or be painted. It all is up to the family once we're done with it. So I'm here now at a new location, still in North Spokane, but we're going to take a look at a completed ramp that has a very similar layout to the one that we just got doing an evaluation for. About 4 to 5 steps, a small yard, and if you can't tell, we're on a busy street. But we won't let that bother us. Let's go take a look at how this one laid itself out. So the first thing that we had to determine in how we're going to do a ramp here is we just needed to know how tall we were. And again, measuring, we were about 30 inches high, very similar to the last one we got evaluating. The other thing that was similar is that the yard is small and it slopes away as you get down towards the sidewalk. So a ramp from the porch straight down just isn't going to work. So we decided to make a top deck up here and then run our ramp in a horseshoe shape. So we go down, have a platform, down, platform, and then return here to the sidewalk just at the base of the stairs. So let's walk through this and we'll take a look at some of the features that if you're building your own ramp or if you're having a contractor put one, that you're going to want to make sure that you have. So starting here at the bottom, features that we want to make sure that we have when you're building a ramp is you want to have a smooth transition that's going to go from the ramp to wherever the sidewalk is. So we use aluminum, put it in this way, but you want to make sure that you've got a good transition. The next thing that we want to make sure we have is a non-slip surface. So this decking was painted with a specific non-slip deck coat paint. Another way you can get that is by just mixing sand into some outdoor decking paint. But you want to have something that's, when it's wet, dry, no matter what, it's got a real good traction. The next thing we want to do is make sure that we've got a good curb down at the base of the ramp. That curb is to prevent a wheel or a tire from going over the edge, because the last thing you want to do pushing the wheel up and down is to catch that edge and have the chair go tumbling off. The next feature we have, now this is a guardrail. Now I say that to distinguish the difference between a guardrail and a handrail. A handrail would be a grippable, like up and down a set of stairs. This ramp didn't need that, so we just have a guardrail to make sure that we don't go falling over the edge that way. We also like to put this mid-rail. The mid-rail, again, if this is open, we don't want someone to run into these posts. So we have this mid-rail. It just kind of keeps the chair and everything right in line, just from a safety standpoint, so that these posts are not on the inside, that you can catch a foot or a toe or a wheel, that this just kind of guides everything down towards the bottom. One of the questions or concerns that people will ask when we talk about a ramp is, what happens to my stairs and my steps? Because people will not necessarily want to have to walk all the way around the ramp to get up and inside their home. And as you can see in this one, the decision was made just to box off those steps going up the front. We didn't remove them, we just went right over the top of them. One option could be to build a second set of steps down off of a portion of the platform. Up here at the top, in the last part of our ramp tour, we have the top platform. You can see this exceeds the 3x3 minimum. We're about a 5 foot by 6 foot, so a nice easy platform for the chair to have space. Also, we built this so that the door will swing out. Make sure that you check that the screen door or whatever does not catch on the ramp itself when you're installing those ramps. And because we made it the same level, it's a very easy transition to get inside. Now, something that we do want to talk about, because this ramp is only 30 inches high, we're not required to have pickets in this space. But on larger ramps, if you exceed 30 inches by code, from a safety standpoint, you want to have pickets that are going to run so that children, pets, whomever is not going to be able to go through. But the 30 inches or less, we're not required to have those.
So we're back at the 9 Mile house today, and they don't have ramps here, but they have a different way that they need to get their loved one from inside the house to their vehicle. What's that look like?
Correct. So this is a daylight rancher where the lower floor is one level with the outside. So there's no step, no need for a ramp. However, most of the accesses from the front of the house come downstairs, and it's just not practical to put a ramp there. So we're just going to simply build a paver walkway, and we decided to use pavers as opposed to just pouring a concrete sidewalk. Pavers are going to be a little bit less expensive. We can do it in about a day, day and a half, and it's also not as permanent. So if the day comes that they want to take this out and just turn it back to a yard, it's not going to be a big deal.
So I would think that there's some questions for your contractor would be, or maybe for the families to think about, is how permanent do you want this pathway to be? And that's why you would chose the pavers, because this family in particular is renting from this area.
Correct.
So this is a way for them to have safe, accessible means to get around, but also easily remove later for the family's resale value.
Correct. And those are all very good points. And it's just something that's pretty easy to do. So you'll see that once we get this all laid in, you'll kind of see how it lays out. It's going to be a pretty good look, and we should be able to take care of it fairly quickly.
And it'll cover all 4 seasons, right? This is really, it's going to stay stable. We don't have to worry about any kind of off-centered or wavy kind of trip hazards or the chair.
Not if it's done right. What we're actually going to do is dig down a little ways, put a good bed of sand. Because we don't have a lot of weight travel, like for example, if you had pavers that you're doing where you might have cars that were going to drive over it or something heavier, you'd have to dig deeper and put a deeper, like a gravel bed underneath it. But for us, since we're just going to have people walk on it, we're simply going to do that. Now, over time, you get like trees that might have roots that would push it up. But for a paver walkway is going to last a lot of years and be a very easy way to get back and forth.
All right. I can't wait to see it.
Sounds good.
Wow, we sure had an exciting day today. Thanks so much for hanging out and showing us around. And I'm glad you got to see a variety of these ramps so you could explain to us.
Yep.
What's your takeaway from today?
Well, I think the things that are important to remember is that, one, it's important to get your ramp in early. And second, know your rules for what needs to apply. Know your local jurisdiction as to what they're going to require as far as permitting goes, or if it's not going to be needed. And you're for 1 inch up, 12 inches out. And then from there, we can determine what length and what type of ramp is going to make the most sense.
And what direction the ramp should be facing, knowing the distance that you're going to have to go out with.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be doing it yourself, if you're going to have an organization that's going to help you, or if you're just going to hire a contractor, what are good questions to ask and understanding of that?
As always, we want to thank ALS Finding a Cure We Care for their very generous grant to make these episodes possible.
Just remember that these videos are meant to be a resource for education for families that are living with ALS, and that you should always check to make sure that you're up to date with your local codes and regulations before moving on with any construction project.
So let's see what that looks like.
Yeah, let's see what that looks like.
How'd we do?
Well, this is very average. So you did well. You got one of the rubber threshold
Wait a minute.
ramps
What's
going
average?
down.
I'm not average.
You did very average.
Yeah, you said average, and I went, I am not.